Nitrogen hypoxia is a term that was created for a particular form of execution. It's a term of art, it's not a medical term. And what it means is, for this form of execution, is that an inmate would be subjected to breathing only nitrogen gas, which is a colorless, odorless gas. And according to states that want to use this method of execution, in a perfect world, the inmate would become unconscious in about 15 seconds or maybe even less, and it would be painless, and the inmate would die a few minutes later. Okay, the nitrogen hypoxia has never been used in the history of the world by any country or anywhere. So that level of unknowingness is problematic. So a number of things can happen. In Alabama, one controversial thing they're using is what should be a sealed mask on the inmate's face. And when I say what should be a sealed mask, because there's great concern that the mask can dislodge or open up, in which case the nitrogen gas can seep out. And there are two problems with that. Number one, it won't kill the inmate as quickly as it should, if at all. The inmate, in other words, could survive. But number two, if it leaks out, it could be a danger to two other people who are going to be sitting in the room, one of whom is the spiritual advisor, and the second of whom is going to be a corrections officer. And because it's odorless, they won't even know they're being exposed, and that can endanger them. The second problem is with this mask is that the inmate, if they're feeling ill, which inmates will if you know you're going to die, that there's a high likelihood that the inmate might vomit into the mask, and that would asphyxiate the inmate in a very slow way. We've already been told by the state of Alabama that they wouldn't stop an execution if the inmate vomited into the mask, that they would just keep it going, and that would slow the degree to which they can breathe this air. It might dislodge the mask, etc. Number three, if the inmate survives and they're not getting enough nitrogen gas, they could survive with serious brain damage. So there are all sorts of problems going on here, and they're not concocted. In other words, there is a physician, an Australian physician, who's conducted over 50 nitrogen gas assisted suicides. And for this purpose, he has created a pod which somebody gets into. They close the pod. It looks like a little car, but it's a pod that they sit in, and they don't have a mask or anything like that, but he fills the pod with nitrogen gas. And so it doesn't seep out or anything like that. And that's his way of assisting suicides. He went to Alabama. He saw what Alabama was planning to use. He actually saw Alabama's mask. It's a mask that's created by a company in Canada. And he agreed that there are a number of potential problems, that he himself would never conduct an assisted suicide that way. It's important for viewers to know why Alabama picked this method of execution. They picked it because they were having so many problems with their lethal injection executions. 2 executions in Alabama, lethal injection executions, failed in the sense that the inmates survived, both in 2022. That's extraordinary. In this country's history, there have been only 5 failed lethal injection executions during which the inmates survived. In other words, they lived after that. Before 2009, that had never happened. It's only because of this experimentation with lethal injection that really started full throttle in 2009. In addition, Alabama in July of 2022 had a terrible execution of Joe Nathan James. This was by lethal injection. It required over 3 hours, and he was in terrible torment the entire time. So when you think in 1 year that one state had 2 inmates who were not, both of whom survived an execution, and one mate who was brutally executed by lethal injection during a process of 3 years, Alabama was being heavily criticized, and they turned to nitrogen hypoxia as a last resort, just to keep the death penalty going. So they even went before the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, to try to argue that even though nitrogen hypoxia is a method that the state had put on the books, that they didn't want to use it for Kenneth Smith because they didn't have a protocol. And the United States Supreme Court said, no, you picked this method. You've got to use it if an inmate selects it and come up with a protocol.